if software-based approaches have these limitations, what kind of a solution does the industry actually need to establish this trust in cryptographic systems? And then I would also like to call Harsh to share his insights on the same.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, everyone. And thanks, Shraddha. Thanks, Gaurav sir, for explaining so well as to what the challenges are in the industry currently. So clearly, we've seen that in the past, the issue has not been protection of the data, but it has been currently it is the control of the cryptographic asset. So the narrative has shifted from just protection to also ensuring protection plus control. So we saw all the challenges that arise with poor key management and protection. We cannot store them in the same instance or the same server where you're encrypting your data, because that just say simplifies the attack path, and a lot of other issues are associated with that. So that brings us to the key question here, that where should these keys actually reside? What is that one environment, or what is that one parameter or security measure that needs to be ensured, so that we know for a fact that yes, these keys are secure and that they can be trusted and that nobody has tampered with them. So what organizations need to focus now, after they have done their encryption mechanisms, once they have installed their encryption mechanisms in place, they need to ensure that there is a trust anchor in their environment. What this trust anchor is going to do is establish a foundation, or it is going to establish, say, a root of trust, and everything else that follows, or everywhere where the cryptographic keys are, say, utilized, are going to be, say, ensured because the keys were stored within the trusted boundary that is uh, established by the root of trust. So in simple terms, what I'm saying is that root of trust is just a foundation, or it is, say, an entity in your infrastructure that you can trust blindly. It is so you can trust it blindly because the way it is designed and the way it operates is that you don't need to verify whether it has been tampered with or not. You will, if at any point in time, if the root of trust is broken, you will get to know about it immediately. The design of these devices, or of any of the, say, cryptographic modules which are used for establishing root of trust, is done in a way that you can just ensure that everything that follows after having an HSM in your environment is going to be secured by it. So coming to just some differences between software and hardware root of trust. So root of trust doesn't necessarily always have to be a hardware device. It can be a software-based solution as well. But there are obviously certain drawbacks based on, say, there can be certain OS vulnerabilities, because the solution that you're going to use is definitely going to run on top of the operating system. So if that has some inherent vulnerabilities, external attackers can exploit these and get into your system. If you're storing your cryptographic keys in a software root of trust environment, they are for sure going to somewhere, so at some point or the other, end up in the, say, non-volatile memory, or in the RAM. So in that case, you are going to, say, have issues with memory exposure. And software root of trust, since it heavily relies on admin credentials and access permissions, if credentials are compromised, your software root of trust doesn't necessarily ensure the right amount of security. Compared to that, when we talk about hardware root of trust, your environment in which you're placing this device that is establishing the root of trust, that environment itself is protected and isolated. That is the first step towards ensuring that these devices will never be tampered with. Even if these devices do end up getting tampered with, there are very, very strict and well-defined measures for tamper protection. There is tamper evidence, there is tamper resistance, there is even tamper active protection. We will touch upon these points in the slides to come. And obviously, within these devices, the keys that are stored and all the cryptographic operations that are performed, the configurations and software that it runs on is obviously designed in a very, very secure manner as well. So that is why hardware root of trust is definitely something that is much more preferred solution compared to software root of trust. So I just felt like it was critical or it was important to touch upon root of trust before we actually get to what HSMs are and what they do. So a hardware security module, simply put, is nothing but a purpose-built hardware appliance. It is a device whose sole purpose is to ensure that your cryptographic keys are protected in the most secure manner possible. So the reason why we can trust the HSM, or why we say that once you store your keys in the HSM, they are for sure going to be protected in the most proper way, is because of how these devices are designed. So the design principle that uh, I would like to touch upon here is called privacy by design. So any hardware security module, inside it lies a certified cryptographic boundary. So the certified cryptographic boundary is the cryptographic module inside it is the heart of the HSM. It is going to perform all of your cryptographic operations. And the way that the cryptographic module functions is that all these operations take place inside this boundary. At any point in time, you cannot have your cryptographic keys transported out of this cryptographic boundary in a usable manner. So all of the requests, say, be it for encryption, decryption, or if it is signing or verification, they need to take place inside the cryptographic boundary. In that way, we can make sure that, yes, these operations are secure. The device itself, since it has got tamper protection mechanisms, it is the operation is happening inside it, so it's not getting tampered with. So since HSMs are such a critical component of any infrastructure, it is performing a very, very important role of protecting your cryptographic assets, your cryptographic keys. So they are designed as per some very strict standards, and the very strict design principles need to be followed and guidelines need to be adhered to while you design and develop your HSM. So there are two globally known compliance standards or compliance models that are followed mainly. So one is FIPS, that is Federal Information Processing Standards. The standard is specified by NIST. NIST is National Institute of Software and Technology. It is a US government agency which has introduced the standard. So that is one, and the another one is common criteria, which is predominantly, say, present in the European market, because it is a European standard. So just to touch upon the differences in between FIPS and common criteria, when it comes to looking at how the cryptographic keys are protected, that is where the FIPS compliance is, that is what it focuses on more. So the FIPS compliance mainly talks about how the keys are protected. It doesn't, talk at length about the entire ecosystem, or the way in which you've developed your HSM, the way in which you're testing it. Those guidelines are not as well defined or not as rigorous as what I mentioned in common criteria. Common criteria, it's being a European compliance, they focus on more than just the ways in which the keys are stored and protected. It has a more broader outlook as to how you're developing a solution, how the communication channels are developed and established. So a more well-rounded approach towards testing and certifying these modules is what is mentioned in common criteria. But that being said, the latest guidelines that FIPS has released, that is FIPS 143 certification guidelines, these are not just based on NIST recommendations, but they are based more on the ISO standards as well. So that is a push by FIPS to have a much more broader approach and well-defined testing standards and mechanisms to certify HSMs. In the Indian market, we have seen that the compliances that are there, that is, say, UIDS compliance for Aadhaar Data Vault or DPDP compliance or any of the SEBI guidelines, you will mostly see the FIPS compliance being present. So I think we can just quickly go on, or we can quickly go over the various levels in which the FIPS compliance certifies any cryptographic module. So if you wish to attain a level 1 certification under FIPS, then that is purely for software modules only. It doesn't talk much on any physical security requirements. If you are looking to get a level 2 certification, then you need to have mechanisms in place for tamper evidence. That is mainly your tamper resistant coatings and other physical locks on the hardware security module or cryptographic module. And in terms of the access control, you need to have basic role-based access control mechanisms. Most hardware security modules, though, are level 3 compliant. So FIPS 142 level 3 or FIPS 143 level 3 now currently are what HSMs need to be compliant with. So here, the level 3 standards talk about tamper resistance mechanisms. So in case the hardware security module is detecting any attempt by an attacker to break into it and get access to the cryptographic material, it will zeroize immediately. So it has got those sensors, it has got the triggers to detect these anomalous activities and act accordingly. Apart from that, it also talks about role and identity-based access controls, and it needs a separate interfacing for all of the critical security parameters. So managing the keys, managing the entropy for your TRNG modules inside the HSM, all of the interfacing for these needs to be done in a very, very isolated manner. So it builds up on each level. The security requirements, they build up. And level 4 security, which is there but not seen very commonly in the HSMs or any cryptographic modules out there, it talks about tamper active zeroization. So the difference between tamper resistance and tamper active zeroization is that for tamper active zeroization, not only attempts to physically tamper with the HSM are monitored, but attempts to mess with the environment in which the HSM is present are also monitored. So for example, if you deliberately try to fluctuate the voltage or fluctuate the temperature in which the HSM, the environment in which the HSM is residing, those are also considered as attacks. So we have a very, very critical infrastructure. If you have a very critical infrastructure, that is where you need a level 4 compliant device. But for most industry scenarios, for most businesses across various industries, it is a level 3 compliance that is mandated. So just to quickly touch upon the different types of the HSM and the form factors. So this is something that is a common confusion that sometimes people can have. The types of HSM are mainly, it can be a general purpose HSM and a payment HSM. The difference is that in a payment HSM, it has got certain additional mechanisms, it has got certain additional algorithms which help in, say, ATM PIN encryption or credit card transaction encryption. So payment industry is governed by a compliance called PCI DSS, which specifies the requirement for these mechanisms in place. That is why a slightly different approach or a different hardware security module is present to meet with these compliances. So these are the two types of HSMs, and each of these types can come in these 4 form factors. So you have a basic network appliance, which is either a 1U or a 2U rack server, which needs a rack space in your data center. Other than that, hardware security modules nowadays are also available as a cloud-based option. So you have security as a service, that is a new software service coming up. So cloud HSMs are also available. Other than that, the third one is a PCIe card. So you have a PCIe card, which you can simply insert into the motherboard of a server, and you can, that one particular server or that device will, on which you're performing certain cryptographic operations, you can secure those using a PCIe slot. And the other fourth option is, say, a USB token. So it is a standard USB device in which the cryptographic module is present, on which you can store your cryptographic keys. So this is mainly for the purpose of having high mobility, and if you wish to plug your HSM into various different devices for, say, signing operations, then a USB token based approach also works. So this is the basic architecture of hardware security modules. It's a very high level abstract diagram here, which will explain what exactly is inside any HSM. So like I said, the core component or the heart of the HSM is the cryptographic module. That is the one that comes with the certification, the FIP certification. So this cryptographic module is going to perform all the cryptographic operations. So all the operations take place inside this boundary. This boundary is built to a standard. That's why it is certified and deemed as safe. Apart from this, you have your basic, you may have various HSM services such as your key replication service or your communication services. So that is another abstract overview of what all is present in the HSM. And there is obviously the key store, which in certain cases can also reside inside the cryptographic module, or the key storage can be outside the cryptographic boundary as well. So these are the few components, and to communicate with the external environment, to communicate with various end devices, you have an interface layer. So the standard way in which hardware security modules communicate with end devices, what has been the legacy interface is PKCS #11. But nowadays, since modern applications are built on microservices architecture, HSMs also have REST API integrations available. So this is a brief on the HSM architecture. And when we come to, say, the various use cases in which hardware security modules are seen or are required. So in the banking industry, like I said, very, very critical cryptographic material, which is, say, encrypting your transactions or your ATM PIN encryptions. So having a hardware security module, a payment HSM in the background is almost a must, given the compliances that are governing the industry. For the government sector, which deals with a lot of personal identification, PII data, you have your Aadhaar Data Vault, you have various PAN-related data, you have airport, passport data. So any historical records that government entities or departments are storing, even if they're having encryption in place, it is recommended to have the hardware security module for key protection. In the enterprise space also, you have e-commerce platforms, various other solution providers and vendors, which are actively dealing or actively capturing customer information. That is where HSMs are again required. And another very important aspect or another important industry or set of organizations where hardware security modules are very critical are certifying authorities. So all of your communication over the internet happens on very secure channels. Those are SSL TLS channels. So any website or any browser needs to have a valid SSL TLS certificate. And these SSL TLS certificates are issued by certifying authorities. So certifying authorities, how do you know that this certifying authority itself is to be trusted or is trustworthy? So certifying authorities establish this root of trust by storing their root CA certificate in an HSM. So that is how certifying authorities also are a major, HSMs are a major use case in certifying authorities.